Right, I guess we're back and we're ready to read some more Hobbit. Uh, where did we leave off? Last time we left off in the middle of a chapter. The dwarves and Bilbo, they are ready to get into the mountain. I think they just found the secret entrance. Oh yeah, and they're about to finally get into the mountain, get into Erebor, and they're about to possibly find a dragon inside. Maybe, maybe not at this point. We're not supposed to know, but I guess we all actually know. So yeah, this is good as a place as any to start. From the last point, it was Bomber would not come up. Okay, so all the dwarves are at the secret entrance except the Bomber. I don't know what he's gonna do. Here we go. In the meantime, some of them explored the ledge beyond the opening and they found a path that led higher and higher onto the mountain, but they did not dare to venture very far that way, nor was there much use in it. Out up there a silence reigned, broken by no bird or sound, except that of the wind in the crannies of stone. They spoke low and never called or sang, for danger brooded in every rock. The others who were busy with the secret of the door had no more success. They were too eager to trouble about the runes or the moon letters, but tried without resting to discover where exactly in the smooth face of the rock the door was hidden. They had brought picks and the tools of many sorts from Lake Town, and at first they tried to use these, but when they struck the stone the handle splintered and it jarred their arms cruelly, and the steel heads broke or bent like lead. Mining work, they saw clearly, was no good against the magic that had shut this door. My phone is going crazy a little bit here. I don't know if you can hear that. It's impacting the signal, I think, but doesn't matter. I'll just keep it a bit farther away from it. Bilbo found sitting on the doorstep lonesome and wearisome. There was not a doorstep, of course, really, but they used to call the little grassy space between the wall and the opening the doorstep. The doorstep in fun, remembering Bilbo's words long ago at the unexpected party in his hobbit hole, when he said he could sit on the doorstep till they thought of something. And sit and think they did, or wandered aimlessly about, and glummer they became. Is that glummer or gloomer? It's glummer, I think. Spelled with a U. Their spirits had risen a little. Is it risen or risen? I can never be sure about this word. Risen. Okay. Their spirits had risen a little at the discovery of the path, but now they sank into their boots, and yet they would not give it up and go away. The hobbit was no longer much brighter than the dwarves. He would do nothing but sit with his back to the rock face and stare away west through the opening, over the cliff, over the wide lands of the black wall of Mirkwood, and to the distance beyond in which he sometimes thought he could catch glimpses of the misty mountains small and far. If the dwarves asked him what he was doing, he answered, "You said sitting on the doorstep and thinking would be my job, not to mention getting inside, so I'm sitting and thinking." But I'm afraid he was not thinking much of the job, and of what lay beyond the blue distance, the quiet western land, and the hill, and his hobbit hole under it. A large grey stone lay in the center of the grass, and he stared moodily at it, or watched the great snails. They seemed to love the little shut-in bay with its walls of cool rock, and there were many of them of huge size crawling slowly and stickily along its sides. Come on, Bilbo. This is not. You've done so much already. But this is the wrong time to drop the. I'm gonna drop the ball. Tomorrow begins the last week of autumn," said Thorin one day. "And winter comes after autumn," said the Biffer. "And next year after that," said the Dwalling. "And our beards will grow till they hang down the cliff to the valley before anything happens here. What is our burglar doing for us? Since he has got an invisible ring and ought to be a specially excellent performer now, I begin to think he might go through the front gate and spy things out a bit." Bilbo heard this. The dwarves were on the rocks just above the enclosure where he was sitting, and good gracious, he thought. So that is what they're beginning to think, is it? It is always poor me that has to get them out of their difficulties, at least since the wizard left. Whatever am I going to do? I might have known that something dreadful would happen to me in the end. I don't think I could bear to see the unhappy Valley of Dale again. And as for that steaming gate... That night he was very miserable and hardly slept. Next day the dwarfs all went wandering off in various directions. Some were exercising the ponies down below, some were roving about the mountainside. Only Bilbo sat gloomily in the grassy bay, gazing at the stone, or out west through the narrow opening. He had a queer feeling that he was waiting for something. Perhaps the wizard would suddenly come back today, he thought. If he lifted his head, he could see a glimpse of the distant forest. As the sun turned west, there was a gleam of yellow upon its far roof, as if the light caused the last pale leaves. Oh, as if the light caught the last pale leaves. So he saw the orange ball of the sun sinking towards the level of his eyes. He went to the opening, and there, pale and faint, was a thin new moon above the rim of earth. At that very moment, he heard a sharp crack behind him. There on the grey stone in the grass was an enormous thrush, nearly coal-black, its pale yellow breast freckled with dark spots. Crack! It had caught a snail and was knocking it on a stone. Crack, crack. Poor snail, whatever did it do to you? You mean little thrush. Suddenly Bilbo understood. Forgetting all danger, he stood on the ledge and hailed the dwarves, shouting and waving. Those that were nearest came tumbling over the rocks and as fast as they could along the ledge to him, wondering what on earth was the matter. The others shouted to be hauled up the ropes, except Bomber, of course, he was asleep. Quickly, Bilbo explained. They all fell silent, the hobbit standing by the grey stone, and the dwarves with wagging beards watching impatiently. The sun sank lower and lower, and their hopes fell. It sank into a belt of reddened cloud and it disappeared. The dwarves groaned, but still Bilbo stood almost without moving. The little moon was dipping to the horizon. Evening was coming on. Then suddenly, when their hope was lowest, a red ray of the sun escaped like a finger through a rent in the cloud. A gleam of light came straight through the opening into the bay and fell on the smooth rock face. The old thrush, who had been watching from a high perch with beady eyes and head cocked on one side, gave a sudden trill. There was a loud crack. A flake of rock split from the wall and fell. A hole appeared suddenly about 3 feet from the ground. Quickly, trembling lest the chance should fade, the dwarves rushed to the rock and pushed. In vain. "The key! The key!" cried Bilbo. "Where's Thorin?" Thorin hurried up. "The key!" shouted Bilbo. "The key that went with the map! Try it now while there's still time." Then Thorin stepped up and drew the key on its chain from round his neck. He put it to the hole. It fitted, and it turned. Snap! The gleam went out. The sun sank. The moon was gone, and evening spread into the night. Now they all pushed together, and slowly a part of the rock wall gave way. Long, straight cracks appeared and widened. A door 5 feet high and 3 broad was outlined, and slowly, without a sound, swung inwards. It seemed as if darkness flowed out like a vapor from the hole in the mountainside, and deep darkness in which nothing could be seen lay before their eyes, a yawning mouth leading in and down. In and down. Whoo-wee! End of chapter. End of chapter 12. End of chapter 11, that was. Okay, they opened the secret door. Well, that was a fun chapter. I'll see you in the next one. Yeah, no, I'm going on. Chapter 12, Inside Information. Inside Information? I wonder what that is about. What information are we talking about here? For a long time, the dwarves stood in the dark before the door and debated, until at last Thorin spoke. "Now is the time for our esteemed Mr. Boggins, who has proved himself a good companion on our long road, and a hobbit full of courage and a resource far exceeding his size. And if I may say so, possessed of good luck far exceeding the usual allowance." Now is the time for him to perform the service for which he was included in our company. Now is the time for him to earn his reward. I don't know, man. I think he earned his reward already. In fact, I think you should give him half of your entire reward and split the other half among your 13. Maybe spare a nickel for Gandalf. You are familiar with Thorin's style in important occasions, so I will not give you any more of it, though he went on a good deal longer than this. It certainly was an important occasion, but Bilbo felt impatient. By now he was quite familiar with Thorin too, and he knew what he was driving at. If you mean you think it is my job to go into the secret passage first, O Thorin Thrain's son Oakenshield, may your beard grow ever longer, he said crossly. Say so at once and have done. I might refuse. I have got you out of 2 messes already, which were hardly in the original bargain, so that I am, I think, already owed some reward. But a third time pays for all, as my father used to say, and somehow I don't think I shall refuse. Perhaps I have begun to trust my luck more than I used to in the old days. He meant last spring before he left his own house, but it seemed centuries ago. But anyway, I think I will go and have a peep at once and get it over. Now who is coming with me? He did not expect a chorus of volunteers, so he was not disappointed. Philly and Killy looked uncomfortable and stood on one leg, but the others made no pretense of offering, except old Balin, the lookout man, who was rather fond of the hobbit. He said he would come inside at least and perhaps a bit of the way too, ready to call for help if necessary. The most that can be said for the dwarves is this. They intended to pay Bilbo really handsomely for his services. They had brought him to do a nasty job for them, then they did not mind the poor little fellow doing it if he would, but they would all have done their best to get him out of trouble if he got into it, as they did in the case of the trolls at the beginning of their adventures, before they had any particular reasons for being grateful to him. Oh my god, you have to cite all the way back to the trolls for an example that the dwarves actually were useful to him. This is how bad the situation has got. There it is. Dwarves are not heroes, but calculating folk with a great idea of the value of money. Some are tricky and treacherous and pretty bad lots. Some are not, but are decent enough people like Thorin and company, if you don't expect too much. The stars were coming out behind him in a pale sky barred with black when the hobbit crept through the enchanted door and stole into the mountain. It was far easier going than he expected. This was no goblin entrance or rough wood elf's cave. It was a passage made by dwarves, at the height of their wealth and skill, straight as a ruler, smooth floored and smooth sided, going with a gentle, never varying slope direct to some distant end in the blackness below. After a while, Balin bade Bilbo good luck, and stopped where he could still see the faint outline of the door, and by a trick of the echoes of the tunnel hear the rustle of the whispering voices of the others just outside. Then the hobbit slipped on his ring, and warned by the echoes to take more than hobbit's care to make no sound, he crept noiselessly down, down into the dark. He was trembling with fear, but his little face was set and grim. Already he was a very different hobbit from the one that had ran out without a pocket handkerchief from Bag End long ago. He had not had a pocket handkerchief for ages. He loosened his dagger in its sheath, tightened his belt, and went on. Yeah, you go, Bilbo. Now you're in for. Oh. Now you're in for it at last, Bilbo Baggins, he said to himself. You went and put your foot right in that night of the party, and now you have got to pull it out and pay for it. Dear me, what a fool I was and am, said at least the Tookish part of him. I have absolutely no use for dragon guarded treasures, and the whole lot could stay here forever if only I could wake up and find this beastly tunnel was my own front hall at home. He did not wake up, of course, but still went on, till all sign of the door behind had faded away. He was altogether alone. Soon he thought it was beginning to feel warm. Is that a kind of glow I seem to see coming right ahead down there? He thought. It was. As he went forward, it grew and grew till there was no doubt about it. It was a red light steadily getting redder and redder. Also, it was now undoubtedly hot in the tunnel. Wisps of vapor floated up and past him, and he began to sweat. A sound too began to throb in his ears, a sort of bubbling like the noise of a large pot galloping on the fire, mixed with a rumble, as of a gigantic tomcat purring. This grew to the unmistakable gurgling noise of some vast animal snoring in its sleep, down there in the red glow in front of him. It was at this point that Bilbo stopped. Going on from there was the bravest thing he ever did. The tremendous things that happened afterwards were as nothing compared to it. He fought the real battle in the tunnel alone, before he ever saw the vast danger that lay in wait. At any rate, after a short halt, go on he did, and you can picture him coming to the end of the tunnel, an opening of much the same size and shape as the door above. Through it peeps the hobbit's little head, before he lies the great bottommost cellar or dungeon hall of the ancient dwarves right at the mountain's root. It is almost dark, so that its vastness can only be dimly guessed, but rising from the near side of the rocky floor, there is a great glow. The glow of Smaug. Oh, this is getting epic. I'm loving this. Smaug. Oh my god, I have to do a Smaug voice. How's that gonna pan out? I don't think I can though. Not in the way the movie did. The movie was like Benedict Cumberbatch plus sound effects. Like I can't match with that. We'll see. I have no plan whatsoever. And in case anyone is wondering about this kind of thing, I don't really prepare for this. I kind of just do whatever. When I do these voices, I already warned you at the very beginning of the series that I'm not an expert of this. I can't do a lot of voices or the different accents or all that. So I'm just doing my best at the whim. um, well, I guess over the course, I guess some of the voices aren't really that consistent. Like Dwalin, for example, I don't remember what I did for when he first appeared in the very first episode. So it's probably when I speak as him now, it's probably not gonna be the same thing. But the thing about this book is the dwarves so far, except Thorin and Balin, I guess, are quite interchangeable. Oh, and a bomber. Bomber at least has a thing. I mean, it's not a very likable thing for the most part. He's mostly a liability, but at least he has a thing that distinguishes him from the other 13, 12, whatever. Okay, now back to the topic. Smaug. There he lay, a vast red golden dragon fast asleep. A thrumming came from his jaws and nostrils, and the wisps of smoke, but his fires were low in slumber. Beneath him, under all his limbs and his huge coiled tail, and about him on all sides, stretching away from across the unseen floors, lay countless piles of precious things, gold wrought and unwrought, gems and the jewels, and a silver red stained in a ruddy light. Smaug lay, with wings folded like an immeasurable bat, turned partly on one side, so that a hobbit could see his underparts and his long pale belly crusted with gems and fragments of gold from his long lying on his costly bed. Beneath him, where the walls were nearest, could dimly be seen coats of mail, helms and axes, swords and spears hanging, and there in rows stood great jars and vessels, filled with a wealth that could not be guessed. To say that Bilbo's breath was taken away is no description at all. There are no words left to express his staggerment, since men changed the language that they learned of elves in the days when all the world was wonderful. When all the world was wonderful. I guess so. I guess at this point that the world is supposed to be like the ancient world is wonderful because it was like dominated by elves and magic, but now magic is fading and men are on the rise, so things are getting a lot more shittier. At least that's the spirit of it. Of course, I've never read the Sumerian. Is that how you call it? Or other complicated history of the Middle Earth that was published after the Lord of the Rings. So I only know the bits and pieces you see in the movies, and I can see that they always have kind of a reverence when they talk about the more ancient times. But I'm guessing if you really get down to the history, really get into those, read the stories about those ages, it's not gonna be all sunshine and pretty all the time. It's more or less, I guess, deified. Hey there. Uh, I don't know how to say your name. Welcome to the chat. Welcome to the reading party. Hope you're enjoying this. All right, we're getting into a very dramatic part, and I'm constantly interrupting myself. Now, where was I? Now I lost myself. That this is great. This is top tier content I'm creating here. Bilbo had heard a tale and a sing of dragon hordes before, but the splendor, the lust, the glory of such treasure had never yet come home to him. His heart was filled and pierced with enchantment, with the desire of dwarves, and he gazed motionless, almost forgetting the frightful guardian, at the gold beyond price and count. I tried reading Hobbit in middle school. Uh, to be honest, I tried reading this once too, like almost 10 years ago when they were just announcing that they were going to do the movies, and at that point, I think I was either in high school or early college. I don't remember exactly, but my English was not as good at the time. I could barely like understand a lot of it, and I remember being the part I did remember. I was honestly a little bored by it. The Hobbit, I've read right now. I've read at least 3/4 of the book, and honestly, it's a lot of description. It's a lot of scenery. It's a lot of exposition. So I could totally understand that why, even though it's meant to be written for kids, like for me back then, and probably for you back then, it kind of gears on your patience a little bit. Yeah, I've seen all the movies. I'm actually quite familiar with the movies. I've seen each of them at least twice. I think maybe 3 times for the first two, and because I usually go watch them in the theater once, go home when they come, watch them once at home when they come out at the home, when when they are released at home, and then I watch them again with the extended edition. Yeah, the movies are. I feel like the movies are really. They made worthy companionships with the book, because I feel like they both had their fair share of advantages and flaws. They kind of complement each other. If you take the best part of the book and the best part of the movie together, it's a quite a nice package. And here we go. He gazed for what seemed an age. Before, drawn almost against his will, he stole from the shadow of the doorway across the floor to the nearest edge of the mounds of treasure. Above him the sleeping dragon lay, a dire menace, even in his sleep. He grasped a great two-handled cup, as heavy as he could carry, and cast one fearful eye upwards. You know, one thing I didn't even notice, they never asked him to find the Arkenstone in this one, not in the movie. So there's no what exactly is the purpose of sending him ahead? Just to look around, just to scout ahead to see if Smaug is here, to see if he's guarding the treasures. And I mean, if that is the case, why does he need to get too close to Smaug? Smaug stirred a wing, opened a claw. The rumble of his snoring changed his note. Then Bilbo fled. Of course he did. But the dragon did not wake. Not yet, but shifted into other dreams of greed and violence, lying there in his stolen hall, while the little hobbit toiled back up the long tunnel. What does he want gold anyway? What does a dragon want a bunch of treasure? Like, what is he just sleeps with them? All these treasure that could feed countless families are just his cuddle buddies. He just he's not even going outside anymore. He just hoards the gold. He doesn't even stretch his wings. He doesn't go anywhere, do anything. What is the point? He's not gonna buy anything with him. Maybe he does. Maybe I don't know. I don't know what he does. His heart, he being Bilbo, his heart was beating, and the more fevered shaking was in his legs than when he was going down. But still, he clutched the cup, and his chief thought was, "I've done it. If this will show them, more like a grocer than a burglar, indeed. Well, we'll hear no more of that." Nor did he. Balin was overjoyed to see the hobbit again, and as delighted as he was surprised. He picked Bilbo up and carried him out into the open air. It was midnight and the clouds had covered the stars, but Bilbo lay with his eyes shut, gasping and taking pleasure in the feel of the fresh air again, and hardly noticing the excitement of the dwarves, or how they praised him and patted him on the back, and put themselves and all their families for generations to come at his service. Well, that never happened. I guess it did. Now that you think about it, Gloin is in the party, and his son is Gimli. Gimli would one day serve beside Frodo. So I guess he, his family did serve Bilbo's family in the end. But yeah, Bilbo actually got away from that. That's very different from the movies. The dwarves were still passing the cup from hand to hand and talking delightedly of the recovery of their treasure, when suddenly a vast rumbling woke in the mountain underneath, as if it was an old volcano that had made up its mind to start eruptions once again. The door behind them was pulled nearly to and blocked them closing with a stone, but up the long tunnel came the dreadful echoes from far down in the depths of a bellowing and a trembling that made the ground beneath them tremble. Don't tell me Smaug actually realized that he's one cup missing from his innumerable treasure, which he doesn't even use. That the dwarves forgot their joy and their confident boasts of a moment before and cowered down in fright. Smaug was still to be reckoned with. It does not do to leave a live dragon out of your calculations if you live near him. Dragons may not have much real use for all their wealth, but they know it to an ounce as a rule, especially after long possession, and the Smaug was no exception. Okay, that's explaining it, I guess. Not really, but yeah. He had passed from an uneasy dream, in which a warrior, altogether insignificant in size, but provided with a bitter sword and great courage, figured most unpleasantly to a doze, and from a doze to wide waking. There was a breath of strange air in his cave. Could there be a draught from that little hole? He had never felt quite happy about it, though it was so small, and now he glared at it in suspicion and wondered why he had never blocked it up. Of late, he had half fancied he had caught the dim echoes of a knocking sound from afar above that came down through it to his lair. He stirred and stretched forth his neck to sniff. Then he missed the cup. Oh my god, really? That's magic. Dragon magic. I don't claim to understand it, I don't claim to dispute it. Thieves. Fire. Murder! Such a thing had not happened since first they came to the mountain. His rage passes description, the sort of rage that is only seen when rich folk that have more than they can enjoy suddenly lose something that they have long had, but have never before used or wanted. Oh my god, is this actually social commentary? His fire belched forth, the hall smoked, it shook the mountain roots. He thrust his head in vain at the little hole, and then coiling his length together, roaring like thunder underground. He spat from his deep lair through its great door, out into the huge passages of the mountain palace, and up towards the front gate. To hunt the whole mountain till he had caught the thief and had it torn and then trampled him was his one thought. He issued from the gate. The waters rose in fierce whistling steam, and up he soared blazing into the air and settled on the mountain top. in a spout of green and scarlet flame. The dwarves heard the awful rumor of his flight, and they crouched against the walls of the grassy terrace, cringing under boulders, hoping somehow to escape the frightful eyes of the hunting dragon. There they would have all been killed, if it had not been for Bilbo once again. Quick! Quick! He gasped. The door! The tunnel! It's no good here! Roused by these words, they were just about to creep inside the tunnel when Bifur gave a cry. My cousins! Bombur and Bofur, we have forgotten them! They're down in the valley! They will be slain, and all our ponies too, and all our stores lost, moaned the others. We can't do nothing. Nonsense, said Thorin, recovering his dignity. We cannot leave them. Get inside, Mr. Baggins of the Balin, and you two fill in the killie. The dragon shan't have all of us. The you others, where are the ropes? Be quick. Those were perhaps the worst moments they had been through yet. The horrible sounds of Smaug's anger were echoing the stony hollows far above. At any moment he might have come blazing down or fly whirling round and find them there, near the perilous cliff's edge, hauling madly on the ropes. Up came Bofur, and still all was safe. Up came Bombur, puffing and blowing while the ropes creaked, and still all was safe. Up came some tools and bundles of stores, and then danger was upon them. At least they didn't try to drag the ponies up. A whirring noise was heard. A red light touched the points of standing rocks. The dragon came. They had barely time to fly back to the tunnel, pulling and dragging in their bundles when Smaug came hurtling from the north, licking the mountain sides with flame, beating his great wings with a noise like a roaring wind. His hot breath shriveled the grass before the door and drove in through the crack they had left and scorched them as they lay hid. Flickering fires leapt up and the black rock shadows danced. Then darkness fell as he passed again. The ponies screamed with terror, burst their ropes and galloped wildly off. The dragon swooped and turned to pursue them, and was gone. Okay, the ponies served their purposes. I guess they became useful distractions for the dragon. That's nice. I just gotta get something to drink, because that was kind of hard on the throat. All these reading sessions have made me painfully realizing my own shortcomings in the longevity of my vocal cords. That is a pretty complicated and unnecessary way of saying that my voice tires very easily. That'll be the end of our poor beast, said Thorin. Nothing can escape Smaug once he sees it. Here we are, and here we shall have to stay. Unless anyone fancies tramping the long open miles back to the river with Smaug on the watch. It was not a pleasant thought. They crept further down the tunnel, and there they lay and shivered, though it was warm and stuffy, until dawn came pale through the crack of the door. Every now and again, through the night, they could hear the roar of the flying dragon grow and then pass and fade as it hunted round and round the mountain sides. He guessed from the ponies and from the traces of the camps he had discovered that men had come up from the river and the lake and had scaled the mountainside from the valley where the ponies had been standing, but the door withstood his searching eye, and the little high-walled bay had kept out his fiercest flames. Long he had hunted in vain till the dawn chilled his wrath, and he went back to his golden couch to sleep, and to gather new strength. He would not forget or forgive the theft. Not if 1,000 years turned him to smoldering stone, but he could afford to wait. Slow and silent he crept back to his lair and half closed his eyes. Okay, so he's pretty chill. When morning came, the terror of the dwarves grew less. They realized the dangers of this kind were inevitable in dealing with such a guardian, and that it was no good giving up their quest yet. Nor could they get away just now, as Thorin had pointed out. Their ponies were lost or killed, and they would have to wait some time before Smaug relaxed his watch sufficiently for them to dare the long way on foot. Luckily, they had saved enough of their stores to last them still for some time. They debated long on what was to be done, but they could think of no way of getting rid of Smaug, which had always been a weak point in their plans, as Bilbo felt inclined to point out. Then, as is the nature of folk that are thoroughly perplexed, they began to grumble at the hobbit, blaming him for what had at first so pleased them, for bringing away a cup and stirring up Smaug's wrath so soon. "What else do you suppose a burglar is to do?" asked Bilbo angrily. "I was not engaged to kill dragons, that is warrior's work, but to steal treasure. I made the best beginning I could. Did you expect me to trot back with the whole horde of thrall on my back? If there is any grumbling to be done, I think I might have a say. You ought to have brought 500 burglars, not one. I'm sure it reflects great credit on your grandfather, but you cannot pretend that you ever made the vast extent of his wealth clear to me. I should want hundreds of years to bring it all up if I was 50 times as big, and a Smaug as tame as a rabbit." After that, of course, the dwarves begged his pardon. I love this. Bilbo dashing out. He's not just taking it. And he, as he should. "Then what do you propose we should do, Mr. Baggins?" asked the Thorin politely. "I have no idea at the moment, if you mean about removing the treasure. That obviously depends entirely on some new turn of luck and the getting rid of Smaug. Getting rid of dragons is not at all in my line, but I will do my best to think about it. Personally, I have no hopes at all, and wish I was safe back at home." "Never mind that for the moment. What do we do now? Today?" "Well, if you really want my advice, I should say we can do nothing but stay where we are. By day we can no doubt creep out safely enough to take the air. Perhaps before long one or two could be chosen to go back to the store by the river and replenish our supplies, but in the meanwhile everyone ought to be well inside the tunnel by night. Now I will make you an offer. I've got my ring, and I will creep down this very noon. That if ever Smaug ought to be napping, and see what he is up to. Perhaps something will turn up. Every worm has its weak spot, as my father used to say, though I am not sure it was not from personal experiences." Naturally, the dwarves accepted the offer eagerly. Already they had come to respect little Bilbo. Now he had become the real leader in their adventure. He had begun to have ideas and plans of his own. When Mayday came, he got ready for another journey down into the mountain. He did not like it, of course, but it was not so bad now he knew more or less what was in front of him. Had he known more about the dragons and their wily ways, he might have been more frightened and less hopeful of catching this one napping. The sun was shining when he started, but it was as dark as night in the tunnel. The light from the door almost closed, soon faded as it went down. So silent was his going that the smoke on the gentle wind could hardly have surpassed it, and he was inclined to feel a bit proud of himself as he drew near the lower door. There was only the very faintest glow to be seen. "Old Smaug is weary and asleep," he thought. "He can't see me, and he won't hear me. Cheer up, Bilbo." He had forgotten or had never heard about the dragon's sense of smell. It is also an awkward fact that they can keep half an eye open, watching, while they sleep, if they are suspicious. Smaug certainly looked fast asleep, almost dead and dark, with scarcely a snore, more than a whiff of unseen steam, when Bilbo peeped once more from the entrance. He was just about to step out on the floor when he caught a sudden thin and piercing ray of red under the drooping lid of Smaug's left eye. He was only pretending to sleep. He was watching the tunnel entrance. Hurriedly, Bilbo stepped back, and blessed the luck of his ring. The Smaug spoke. "Oh, I've been dreading this moment." "Well, hmm, I, it's very hard for me to do a low voice. Oh, uh, hmm. Well, thief, I smell you, and I feel your air. I hear your breath. Come along, help yourself again. There is plenty and to spare." Is he trying to rhyme? Because air rhymes with spare. Because I don't know if this is intentional. What if, like, they finally meet this dreaded beast and he only speaks in haiku? But Bilbo was not quite so unlearned in dragon lore as all that, and if Smaug hoped to get him to come nearer so easily, he was disappointed. No, thank you, O Smaug the Tremendous. I did not come for presents. I only wished to have a look at you and see if you were truly as great as tales say. I did not believe them. Do you now? Said the dragon, somewhat flattered, even though he did not believe a word of it. Truly, songs and tales fall utterly short of the reality. O Smaug, the chiefest and greatest of calamities, replied Bilbo. You have a nice manner for a thief and a liar, said the dragon. You seem familiar with my name, but I don't seem to remember smelling you before. Who are you, and where do you come from, may I ask? See, the dragon's polite. You may indeed. I come from under the hill, and under the hills and over the hills my paths led, and through the air I am he that walks unseen. So I can well believe, said Smaug, but that is hardly your usual name. I am the clue finder, the web cutter, the stinging fly. I was chosen for the lucky number. Lovely titles, sneered the dragon, but lucky numbers don't always come off. I am he that buries his friends alive and drowns them and draws them alive again from the water. I came from the end of a bag, but no bag went over me. Where does that even come from, Bilbo? Just making all this shit up on the spot. These don't sound so creditable, scoffed the Smaug. I am the friend of bears and the guest of eagles. I am ringwinder and luckwearer. Oh wait. Oh, this is Bilbo again. I am the friend of bears, the guest of eagles. I'm ringwinder and the luckwearer, and I am barrow rider, went on Bilbo, beginning to be pleased with his riddling. That's better, said the Smaug. But don't let your imagination run away with you. This, of course, is the way to talk to dragons. If you don't want to reveal your proper name, which is wise, and don't want to infuriate them by a flat refusal, which is also very wise, no dragon can resist the fascination of riddling talk and of wasting time trying to understand it. There was a lot here which Smaug did not understand at all, though I expect you do, since you know all about Bilbo's adventures to which he was referring. But he thought he understood enough, and he chuckled in his wicked inside. I thought so last night, he smiled to himself. Lakemen. Some nasty scheme of those miserable, top-trading lakemen. Oh, I'm a lizard. I haven't been down that way for an age and an age, but I will soon alter that. Very well. Oh, very well, oh barrow rider, he said aloud. Maybe Barrow was your pony's name, and maybe not, though it was fat enough. You may walk unseen, but you did not walk all the way. Let me tell you, I ate 6 ponies last night, and I shall catch and eat all the others before long. In return for the excellent meal, I will give you one piece of advice for your good. Don't have more to do with dwarves than you can help. Dwarves? Said Bilbo in pretended surprise. Don't talk to me, said Smaug. I know the smell and the taste of dwarf. No one better. Don't tell me that I can eat a dwarf-ridden pony and not know it. You'll come to a bad end if you go with such friends, thief, barrow rider. I don't mind if you go back and tell them so from me. But it did not tell Bilbo that there was one smell he could not make out at all. Hobbit smell. It was quite outside his experience and it puzzled him mightily. I love that about this story actually, the fact that the hobbits actually fare so strangely into these grand adventures. Like they are the least likely to be heroes of adventures. They're the farthest kind of people from the heroic type. But because of that, they have this kind of advantage over Smaug because Smaug can't read him. Smaug is not used to seeing beings like him, so it works very well with the theme. I suppose you got a fair price for the cup last night, he went on. Come now, did you? Nothing at all? Well, that's just like them, and I suppose they're skulking outside, and your job is to do all the dangerous work and get what you can when I'm not looking. For them, and you will get a fair share? Don't you believe it? If you get off alive, you will be lucky. I can agree with him, though. That's totally the case. Bilbo was now beginning to feel really uncomfortable. Whenever Smaug's roving eyes seeking for him in the shadows flashed across him, he trembled, and an uncountable desire seized hold of him to rush out and reveal himself and tell all the truth to Smaug. In fact, he was in grievous danger of coming under the dragon's spell, but plucking up courage, he spoke again. You don't know everything, O Smaug the Mighty, said he. Not go the long brothers hither. Ha 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 ha! You admit the us, laughed Smaug. Why not say us 14 and be done with it, Mr. Lucky Number? I am pleased to hear that you had other business in these parts beside my gold. In that case, you may, perhaps, not altogether waste your time. Who is this again? Oh, still Smaug. I don't know if it has occurred to you that even if you could steal the gold bit by bit, a matter of 100 years or so, you could not get it very far. Not much use on the mountainside, not much use in the forest. Bless me. Have you never thought of the catch? A 14th share, I suppose, or something like that. Those were the terms, eh? But what about delivery? What about cartage? What about armed guards and the tolls? And the Smaug laughed aloud. He had a wicked and a wily heart, and he knew his guesses were not far out, though he suspected that the lakemen were at the back of the plans, and that most of the plunder was meant to stop there in the town by the shore that in his young days had been called Esgaroth. You will hardly believe it, but poor Bilbo was really very taken aback. So far, all his thoughts and energies had been concentrated on getting to the mountain and finding the entrance. He had never bothered to wonder how the treasure was to be removed. Certainly, never how any part of it that might fall to his share was to be brought back all the way to Bag End under a hill. What a considerate dragon, by the way. Just for someone who doesn't seem to get out much, he has a very keen mind about the logistics. Now, a nasty suspicion began to grow in his mind. Had the dwarves forgotten this important point too, or were they laughing in their sleeves at him all the time? That is the effect that dragon talk has on the inexperienced. Bilbo, of course, ought to have been on his guard, but Smaug had rather an overwhelming personality. I tell you, he said, in an effort to remain loyal to his friends and to keep his end up, that gold was only an afterthought with us. We came over hill and under hill, by wave and wind, for revenge. Surely, O Smaug the inaccessibly wealthy, you must realize that your success has made you some bitter enemies. The Smaug really did laugh, a devastating sound which shook Bilbo to the floor, while far up in the tunnel the dwarves huddled together and imagined that the Hobbit had come to a sudden and a nasty end. Revenge, he snorted, and the light of his eyes lit the hall from floor to ceiling like scarlet lightning. Revenge! The king under the mountain is dead, and where are his kin that dare seek revenge? Girion, lord of Dale, is dead, and I have eaten his people like a wolf among sheep. And where are his sons that dare approach me? I kill where I wish, and none dare resist. I laid low the warriors of old, and their like is not in the world today. Then I was but young and tender. Now I am old and strong. Strong. Strong thief in the shadows, he gloated. My armor is like tenfold shields. My teeth are swords. My claws spears. The shock of my tail a thunderbolt. My wings a hurricane, and my breath death. Wow, that was exhausting. I have always understood, said Bilbo in a frightened squeak, the dragons were softer underneath, especially in the region of the chest. But doubtless one so fortified has thought of that. The dragon stopped short in his boasting. Your information is antiquated, he snapped. I am armored above and below with iron scales and hard gems. No blade can pierce me. I might have guessed it, said Bilbo. Truly, there can nowhere be found the equal of Lord Smaug the Impenetrable. What magnificence to possess a waistcoat of fine diamonds! Yes, it is rare and wonderful indeed, said Smaug, absurdly pleased. He did not know that the hobbit had already caught a glimpse of his peculiar undercovering on his previous visit, and was itching for a closer view for reasons of his own. The dragon rolled over. Look, he said. What do you say to that? He's fun. He's like, look how gorgeous I am. Dazzlingly marvelous. Perfect, flawless, staggering, exclaimed the Bilbo aloud, but what he thought inside was, old fool, why there's a large patch in the hollow of his left breast, as bare as a snail out of its shell. After he had seen that Mr. Baggins' one idea was to get away, well, I really must not detain your magnificence any longer, he said. I'll keep you from much needed rest. Ponies take some catching, I believe, after a long start, and so do burglars, he added as a parting shot, as he darted back and fled up the tunnel. It was an unfortunate remark, for the dragon spouted terrific flames after him, and fast though he sped up the slope, he had not gone nearly far enough to be comfortable before the ghastly head of Smaug was thrust against the opening behind. Luckily, the whole head of the jaws could not squeeze him, but the nostrils sent forth fire and vapor to pursue him, and he was nearly overcome, and stumbled blindly on in great pain and fear. He had been feeling rather pleased with the cleverness of his conversation with Smaug, but his mistake at the end shook him into better sense. Never laugh at live dragons, Bilbo, you fool, he said to himself, and it became a favorite saying of his later, and passed into a proverb. You aren't nearly through this adventure yet, he added, and that was pretty true as well. Wow, this chapter's a doozy. It's crazy. It's insane. The afternoon was turning into evening when he came out again, and stumbled and fell in a faint on the doorstep. The dwarves revived him, and doctored his scorches as well as they could, but it was a long time before the hair on the back of his head and his heels grew properly again. It had all been singed and frizzled right down to the skin. In the meanwhile, his friends did their best to cheer him up, and they were eager for his story, especially wanting to know why the dragon had made such an awful noise and how Bilbo had escaped. But the hobbit was worried and uncomfortable, and they had difficulty in getting anything out of him. On thinking things over, he was now regretting some of the things he had said to the dragon, and was not eager to repeat them. The old thrush was sitting on a rock nearby with its head cocked out on one side, listening to all that was said. It shows what an ill temper Bilbo was in. He picked up a stone and threw it at the thrush, which merely fluttered aside and came back. "Dread the bird," said Bilbo crossly. "I believe he is listening, and I don't like the look of him." "I'll leave him alone," said Thorin. "The thrushes are good and friendly. This is a very old bird indeed, and this may be the last left of the ancient breed that used to live about here, tamed to the hands of my father and grandfather. They were a long-lived and magical race. This might even be one of those that were alive then, a couple of hundreds of years or more ago. The men of Dale used to have the trick of understanding the language, and they used them for messengers to fly to the men of the lake and elsewhere." "Well, he'll have news to take to Lake Town, all right, if that is what he's after," said Bilbo. "Though I don't suppose there are any people left there that have trouble with thrush language." "Why, what has happened?" cried the dwarves. "Do get on with your tale." So Bilbo told them all he could remember, and he confessed that he had a nasty feeling that the dragon guessed too much from his riddles added to the camps and the ponies. "I'm sure he knows we came from Lake Town and had help from there, and I have a horrible feeling that his next move may be in that direction. I wish the goodness had never said that about Barrel Rider. It would make even a blind rabbit in these parts think of the lakemen." "Well, well, it cannot be helped, and it is difficult not to slip in talking to a dragon, or so I've always heard," said Balin, anxious to comfort him. "Balin is just so nice." "I think you did very well, if you ask me. You found out one very useful thing at any rate, and got home alive, and that is more than most can say who have had words with the likes of Smaug. It may be a mercy and a blessing yet to know of the bare patch in the old worm's diamond waistcoat." That turned the conversation, and all began discussing dragon slaying, historical, dubious, and mythical, and the various sorts of stabs, and jabs, and undercuts, and the different arts devices and stratagems by which they had been accomplished. The general opinion was that catching the dragon napping was not as easy as it sounded, and the attempt to stake one or prod one asleep was more likely to end in disaster than a bold frontal attack. All the while they talked, the thrush listened, till at last, when the stars began to peep forth, it silently spread its wings and flew away. And all the while they talked, and the shadows lengthened, the Bilbo became more and more unhappy, and his foreboding grew. At last he interrupted them. "I'm sure we are very unsafe here," he said, "and I don't see the point of sitting here. The dragon has withered all the pleasant green, and anyway, the night has come and it is cold. But I feel it in my bones that this place will be attacked again. Smaug knows now how I came down to this hall, and you can trust him to guess where the other end of the tunnel is. He will break all this side of the mountain to bits if necessary, to stop up our entrance, and if we are smashed with it, the better he will like it." "You are very gloomy, Mr. Parkins," said Thorin. "Why has not Smaug blocked the lower end, then, if he is so eager to keep us out? He has not, or we should have heard him." I don't know, because at first he wanted to try and lure me in again, I suppose, and now perhaps because he is waiting till after tonight's hunt, or because he does not want to damage his bedroom if he can help it. But I wish you would not argue. Smaug will be coming out at any minute now, and our only hope is to get well in the tunnel and shut the door." He seemed so much in earnest that the dwarves at last did as he said, though they delayed shutting the door. It seemed a desperate plan, but no one knew whether or not they could get it open again from the inside, and the thought of being shut in a place from which the only way out led through the dragon's lair was not one they liked. Also, everything seemed quite quiet, both outside and down the tunnel, so for a longish while they sat inside not far from the half-open door and went on talking. The talk turned to the dragon's wicked words about the dwarves. Bilbo wished he had never heard them, or at least that he could feel quite certain that the dwarves were now absolutely honest when they declared that they had never thought at all about what would happen after the treasure had been won. "We knew it would be a desperate venture," said Thorin, "and we know that still. And I still think that when we have won it will be time enough to think of what to do about it. As for your share, Mr. Buggins, I assure you we are more than grateful, and you shall choose your own 14th, as soon as we have anything to divide. I'm sorry if you are worried about the transport, and I admit the difficulties are great. The lands have not become less wild with the passing of time, rather the reverse. but we will do whatever we can for you, and take our share of the cost when the time comes. Believe me or not as you like. From that, the talk turned to the great hall itself and to the things that Thorin and Balin remembered. They wondered if they were still lying there unharmed in the hall below, the spears that were made for the armies of the great King Bladorthin, long since dead. Each had a thrice forged head, and their shafts were inlaid with cunning gold, but they were never delivered or paid for. Shields made for warriors long dead, the great golden cup of Thrall, two-handed, hammered and carven with birds and flowers, whose eyes and the petals were of jewels. Coats of mail gilded and silvered and impenetrable. The necklace of Girion, lord of Dale, made of 500 emeralds green as grass, which he gave for the arming of his eldest son, in a coat of dwarf-linked rings, and the like of which had never been made before, for it was wrought of pure silver to the power and the strength of triple steel. But fairest of all was the great white gem, which the dwarfs had found beneath the roots of the mountain, the heart of the mountain, the Arkenstone of Thrain. The Arkenstone, the Arkenstone, murmured Thor in the dark, half dreaming with his chin upon his knees. It was like a globe with 1,000 facets. It shone like silver in the firelight, like water in the sun, like snow under the stars, like rain upon the moon. Rain upon the moon? That a thing? But the enchanted desire of the horde had fallen from Bilbo. All through their talk he was only half listening to them. He sat nearest to the door with one ear cocked for any beginnings of a sound without. His other was alert for echoes beyond the murmurs of the dwarves, for any whisper of a movement from far below. Darkness grew deeper, and he grew even more uneasy. "Shut the door," he begged them. "I fear that dragon in my marrow. I like this silence far less than the uproar of last night. Shut the door before it is too late." Something in his voice gave the dwarfs an uncomfortable feeling. Slowly Thorin shook off his dreams, and getting up, he kicked away the stone that wedged the door. Then they thrust upon it, and it closed with a snap and a clang. No trace of a keyhole was there left on the inside. They were shut in the mountain. And not a moment too soon. They had hardly gone any distance down the tunnel when the blow smote the side of the mountain like the crash of battering rams made of forest oaks in a swamp by giants. The rock boomed, the walls cracked, and the stones fell from the roof on their heads. What would have happened if the door had still been open, I don't like to think. They fled further down the tunnel, glad to be still alive, while behind them outside they heard the roar and the rumble of Smaug's fury. He was breaking rocks to pieces, smashing wall and the cliff with the lashing of his huge tail, till their little lofty camping around. The scorched grass, the thrashed stone, the snail-covered walls, the narrow ledge, and all disappeared in the jumble of smithereens, and an avalanche of splintered stones fell over the cliff into the valley below. Smaug had left his lair in silent stealth, quietly soared into the air, and then floated heavy and slow in the dark, like a monstrous crawl, down the wind towards the west of the mountain, in the hopes of catching sorry, in the hopes of catching unawares something or somebody there, and of spying the outlet to the passage which the thief had used. This was the outburst of his wrath, when he could find nobody and see nothing, even where he guessed the outlet must actually be. So does he actually not know about the secret entrance? I guess he doesn't. He definitely has never used it himself, and he has no use of it. It's not like he invites anybody inside. After he had let off his rage in this way, he felt better, and he thought in his heart that he would not be troubled again from that direction. In the meanwhile, he had further vengeance to take. "Barrow Rider," he snorted, "your feet came from the water side, and up the water you came without a doubt. I don't know your smell, but if you are not one of those men of the lake, you had their help. They shall see me, and remember who is the real king under the mountain." He rose in fire and went away south towards the running river. End of chapter 12. Holy shit. That was a lot. That was a lot just happened. Okay, Smaug is a really fun character to read. I love the part. This is maybe my favorite chapter of the whole book. It's either this or the Gollum chapter. I love. I guess I maybe it's because I'm reading them out loud, so this kind of chapters naturally get a boon in my interest in them because I can get to read the conversations and all that. But I do love a story driven by dialogue and very well written dialogue at that. So yeah, they met Smaug. Actually, only Bilbo met Smaug, and Smaug's not too happy about people coming in to steal his things. But I guess he's not too mad about it because he could have just killed Bilbo very easily. But he actually stayed and chatted with him and gave him some sound advices and all that. I don't know why he has to. Maybe it's just in his nature. There's a lot of things about dragons in this book that I just don't quite understand. But it probably all comes down to their instinct, like their fascination of gold and their magic about hoodwinking people. I mean, I guess I can just understand that that might be a thing. The talking to dragons, you might get bewitched by some magic, but why would they bother? Like they're dragons. They are perfectly able to squash any enemy with raw strength. Why do they need to bewitch them first? But I don't know. Anyway, Smaug is now going to do some damage to Lake Town, and the book is kind of coming to an end, I guess. The next chapter is chapter 13. Is called "A Note at Home." I will begin reading that in the next session. We have already gone over an hour, which is not that long compared to most other videos you see here. But you know, reading constantly kind of drives home the exhaustion a little bit. Whew. I think we're actually about coming very close to the end of the book. We may have two, three chapters left. I don't know. I'm not sure, but I'm really looking forward to see where this goes. I totally would go on if my vocal cords could permit it. I just feel like if I did go on, I would kind of struggle with it, and I would not be able to enjoy the story as fully as otherwise would be. So thanks for watching this, and I'll see you next time to see what Smaug does to Lake Town. And until then, I hope you have a very wonderful time, and yeah, see you next time.